The T-34-85 crews rolling south through the Korean summer of June 1950 carry themselves like conquerors. They have reason. 5 years ago, these same tanks smashed through the Reichstag's gates, crushed the Wehrmacht's finest tigers and panthers, turned Berlin into a monument to Soviet armor. The commanders joke in their turrets, sharing cigarettes, dismissing the intelligence briefs about American reinforcements. "Tin cans," one lieutenant says, flicking ash onto the dusty road. "The Americans bring toys. We bring the tank that won the war." They've studied the reports. The M4 Sherman, laughable. Thin armor, underpowered gun, a rolling coffin that German tankers called a Tommy Cooker because of how easily it burned. The Americans lost thousands of them in Europe. Now they're shipping more to Korea? The North Korean crews actually feel sorry for the Roki forces. Not enough to spare them, but enough to smirk at the mismatch. The T-34's sloped armor deflects everything the Shermans can throw. The 85mm gun punches through American steel like foil. This won't be a war. It'll be a parade route paved with burning Shermans. The smell of diesel hangs heavy in the humid air. Sweat soaks through their tanker coveralls. But morale runs high. Each crew knows their history. Kursk, where T-34s swallowed entire panzer divisions. Manchuria, where they crushed the Japanese Kwantung Army in 11 days. This tank, this exact design with minor improvements, rewrote warfare. The sloped frontal armor, the wide tracks for mobility, the balance of firepower and protection. Soviet engineers created a masterpiece. German tankers feared it. Japanese crews abandoned their positions at the sight of it. What chance do soft Americans have? The commanders brief their crews with absolute confidence. Engage at 800 meters. Aim for center mass. The Sherman's armor won't stop our rounds. Don't waste ammunition on kill shots. Wound them, let them burn. Move to the next target. It's doctrine refined through 4 years of the Great Patriotic War. It's proven. It's inevitable. Radio chatter stays light. Crews discuss Tokyo Rose broadcasts, share rumors about American morale collapsing, plan what they'll do in Pusan when the peninsula falls. The youngest loader in 3rd Company is 19, same age as the tank commander who took his T-34 into Berlin. He polishes the 85mm shells with pride, imagines the stories he'll tell. His grandfather fought at Stalingrad with a Mosin Nagant. He gets to liberate Korea with the most advanced tank in the world. They cross the parallel in formation, 12 tanks advancing like iron destiny, dust plumes behind their treads. The engine roar is a familiar symphony. Every crew member knows their role, driver, gunner, loader, commander, moving with practiced efficiency. They've drilled these maneuvers until they're muscle memory. Fire, reload, advance. The Americans have numbers maybe, but numbers don't matter when you're outgunned and outarmored. Late afternoon, July 17, 1950. The lead tank commander scans the ridgeline near Taejon through his periscope. Heat shimmer makes the horizon waver. Then he sees it, a silhouette, boxy, unfamiliar, bigger than a Sherman. He reaches for his radio, curiosity creasing his face. Unknown tank type, engaging. He traverses the turret, centers the sight, orders the gunner to fire. The 85mm gun roars. 800 meters, center mass, textbook shot. The round streaks down range. It sparks off the target's armor like a match struck against stone. The return shot arrives 1.2 seconds later. Then the radio crackles. Unknown tank type, engaging. Silence. The T-34 commander doesn't process what just happened. His mind rejects it. Impossible physics, impossible angles. The American round doesn't ricochet or deflect. It doesn't even slow. It punches through the frontal glacis plate, the armor that stopped German 75mm guns at Kursk, the steel that defined invincibility for half a decade. The penetrator keeps traveling, through the driver's compartment, through the ammunition rack, through the rear plate. Both sides of the tank wear matching holes, each the diameter of a fist, edges glowing cherry red from friction heat. The crew has 3 seconds to register the impossible before the sympathetic detonation begins. 85mm shells cook off in sequence. The turret lifts, suspended on a column of fire and pressure, then crashes down offset from the hull. Black smoke pours from every hatch. The smell hits the adjacent tanks immediately. Burning diesel, scorched paint, something worse underneath. Second company's lead tank pivots, trying to comprehend. The commander's training screams contradictions. American tanks can't penetrate T-34 armor at this range. Soviet doctrine is explicit. The T-34-85 outmatches every Western design and theater. But First Company's lead tank is burning, and the unknown silhouette on the ridgeline is traversing its turret toward him. He makes the only choice that makes sense. Attack. Close the range. Bring superior Soviet firepower to bear. He orders the driver forward, engine roaring, tracks chewing dirt. 800 meters becomes 750. 700. The gunner has a better angle now, can see the American tank clearly. Taller than a Sherman. Wider hull, a gun that looks too big for the turret. The gunner fires. The round hits the frontal armor at 65 degrees. Textbook penetration angle. It should punch through. The laws of physics say so. Every engagement in the Great Patriotic War confirms it. The shell shatters against the glacis plate like glass. The American gun fires again. This time, the round enters through the turret ring, that small gap between hull and rotating assembly. The penetrator shears through mechanical linkages, hydraulic lines, the gunner's station. The gunner ceases to exist as an intact human being. The commander sees it happen, sees the pink mist, and his mind finally accepts reality. They're outmatched, catastrophically, fundamentally. He reaches for the radio to warn Third Company. The third American round arrives before his fingers touch the transmit button. It enters below the turret, angles downward through the fighting compartment, detonates the fuel tank. The T-34 becomes a crematorium on treads. The force blows the driver's hatch open. No one emerges. Third Company's commander watches 2 burning T-34s and 1 impossibility. American armor that defeats Soviet shells. American guns that ignore T-34 protection. He counts 4 more boxy silhouettes on the ridgeline now, all traversing toward his position. His gunner is screaming for target priority. His driver is asking for orders. The radio carries nothing but static and distant explosions. 5 years of Soviet armor doctrine insists he should engage, should close range, should trust in the T-34's proven superiority. 5 years of doctrine just burned to slag in 90 seconds. He gives the only order that makes sense anymore. Reverse. Full speed. The driver throws the transmission into reverse. The tank lurches backward, tracks spinning, engine screaming. The ridgeline erupts with muzzle flashes. 1, 2, 3, 4 American guns firing in sequence. Third Company scatters like mercury on glass, each crew suddenly aware that the rules changed without warning. 3 more T-34s burn before anyone understands what just killed them. The T-34-85 earned its mythology in blood and fire. Stalingrad, where the original T-34s held the Volga against panzer divisions. Kursk, where 850 Soviet tanks absorbed the largest armored offensive in history and broke the Wehrmacht's back. Berlin, where T-34-85s, the upgraded model with the bigger gun, crushed the last desperate Panther and Tiger defenders in street fighting. So brutal it melted tank barrels. Every crew in Korea knows these stories. They're not propaganda. They're verified history, written in the wreckage of 20,000 destroyed German tanks. The T-34's sloped armor wasn't theoretical. It deflected 75mm rounds at ranges where German tanks exploded under return fire. The Christie suspension let it cross terrain that bogged down Panthers. The wide tracks distributed weight across mud and snow that swallowed Nazi armor. Soviet designers created something revolutionary, a tank that balanced firepower, protection, and mobility better than anything fielded by any nation in World War II. The 85mm gun changed the calculus. Earlier T-34-76 struggled against Tiger I frontal armor, had to flank and swarm. The 85mm penetrated Tiger armor at combat ranges. It shredded Panthers. It made the T-34-85 the predator in every engagement. German tankers developed doctrine around avoiding T-34 packs because winning meant losing tanks you couldn't replace. The Soviets could replace losses. Germany couldn't. Mathematics and metallurgy combined to bury the Third Reich. Then Manchuria, August 1945. The Kwantung Army fielded obsolete tanks, outdated doctrine, and got annihilated. T-34-85s covered 800 kilometers in 11 days, crushing Japanese positions so thoroughly that the invasion ended before American forces landed. The tank performed flawlessly in mountains, deserts, urban combat. It didn't matter what the terrain was or what the enemy fielded. The T-34 won. So when North Korean crews received their T-34-85s in early 1950, they inherited 5 years of invincibility. Soviet advisors trained them on tactics proven across 2 continents. The Americans? They lost 4,000 Shermans in Europe despite overwhelming numerical superiority and air dominance. Everyone knew the Sherman story. Undertrained crews, inadequate armor, a 75mm gun that couldn't penetrate German heavy tanks frontally. American tankers called their own vehicles death traps. British crews refused to operate Shermans without modifications. The Sherman was what you fielded when you had factories and manpower, but not engineering excellence. Intelligence briefs confirmed it. ROC forces had M24 Chaffee light tanks, essentially armored cars with delusions. Then reports mentioned M4A3 Shermans arriving at Pusan. North Korean commanders actually laughed. The Sherman's 76mm gun couldn't penetrate T-34 frontal armor at combat ranges. The Sherman's armor wouldn't stop the 85mm round. Every metric favored the T-34: speed, protection, firepower. Soviet engineering dominated every category. The crews believed because the evidence was overwhelming. Their tanks defeated the most technologically advanced army in European history. They crushed Japanese armor in days. Now they faced Americans who barely kept Tigers and Panthers at bay, with 5-to-1 numerical advantages and constant air support. Korea had no Luftwaffe. Korea had narrow valleys and restricted terrain that negated American numbers. Korea would be a turkey shoot. The smell of confidence hung thicker than the diesel smoke. Crews painted kill markings on their barrels before engaging. 5 tanks, 10 tanks, ambitious tallies for the anticipated slaughter. The youngest loader kept asking his commander how many Shermans they'd kill before Pusan. The commander kept answering, "As many as we have ammunition for." Every piece of doctrine, every combat report, every technical specification supported their certainty. The T-34-85 was the best tank in theater. The Americans brought inferior equipment operated by soldiers who'd never faced real armor warfare. But the Americans didn't bring what the Soviets expected. The M26 Pershing carries a 90mm gun that fires a 24-pound armor-piercing projectile at 2,800 feet per second. The numbers sound clinical until you understand what they mean in steel and physics. The kinetic energy, mass times velocity squared, delivers 3.8 million foot-pounds of force at muzzle exit. For comparison, the T-34-85's gun delivers 2.1 million. The Pershing doesn't just outgun the T-34. It exists in a different category of violence. The projectile itself is engineering art. A tungsten carbide penetrator core wrapped in mild steel, designed to maintain integrity through armor impact. Earlier, American rounds shattered against sloped plates. The tungsten stayed coherent, punched through, kept traveling. The Germans developed similar penetrators late in the war, but never fielded them in quantity. The Americans spent 1946 through 1949 perfecting the metallurgy, testing against captured Panther armor, German steel, every sloped plate configuration they could acquire. The Korean War became the live-fire exam. Against T-34 armor, designed in 1943 to defeat German 75mm guns, the tungsten penetrator is obscene overkill. The T-34's frontal glacis is 45mm thick at 60 degrees, brilliant design for deflecting 1943-era shells. Sloped armor increases effective thickness, forces rounds to travel through more steel, encourages ricochets. It worked against Panthers. It worked against Tiger IIs. It cannot work against a penetrator moving at 3 times the speed of sound with hardness ratings that exceed the target steel by orders of magnitude. The physics are brutal and simple. The tungsten core hits the sloped plate, doesn't deflect, begins penetrating. Friction generates heat, thousands of degrees in microseconds. The surrounding steel of the penetrator ablates away, but the tungsten maintains coherence. It punches through the glacis in 0.003 seconds, traveling at reduced but still supersonic velocity. Behind the armor, it encounters the driver's compartment, the ammunition racks, the fuel tanks, soft targets. The penetrator keeps going, exits through the rear plate, often travels another 100 meters downrange. The Pershing's armor tells the opposite story. Frontal glacis, 100 mm at 46 degrees. Turret front, 114 mm. Effective thickness against the T-34's 85 mm gun approaches 200 mm in some aspects. The Americans studied every engagement report from Europe, every German armor scheme, every Soviet development they could intelligence gather. They built the Pershing to defeat King Tigers. The T-34's gun was designed to penetrate 110 mm of vertical armor at 500 meters. Against sloped plates, against American metallurgy refined through 5 years of industrial warfare, the 85 mm round doesn't have the energy. North Korean gunners firing at 800 meters watch their rounds spark off Pershing armor like fireworks. The shells either shatter on impact or deflect skyward, leaving gouges and scorch marks, but no penetration. Soviet doctrine taught them that 800 meters was a killing range for the 85 mm gun. Soviet doctrine was based on fighting Panthers and Tigers with different armor properties, different metallurgical compositions. The Americans brought post-war steel, chromium molybdenum alloys, face-hardened plates that the Soviets wouldn't match until the T-54 program completed in 1951. The final advantage is mechanical. The Pershing's gun stabilizer, crude by later standards but functional, lets crews fire accurately while moving. The T-34 requires a full stop for accurate gunnery. In the valleys around Taejon, at the Naktong Perimeter, this means Pershing crews engage while repositioning. T-34 crews have to choose, maneuver or shoot. The Americans do both simultaneously. It's not a fair fight. It was never going to be a fair fight. The Pershing was designed to defeat the best armor Germany fielded in 1945. The T-34-85 was designed in 1943, and the killing ratio proves it wasn't luck. August 1950, the Naktong Perimeter. 15 T-34-85s mass for a breakthrough assault on American positions defending the last defensive line before Pusan. North Korean commanders committed their best remaining armor, crews with combat experience, tanks with fresh ammunition loads, a battle plan that worked twice before against rock forces. The strategy is Soviet doctrine distilled: concentrate armor, overwhelm a sector, exploit the breach. It crushed the Wehrmacht. It'll crush the Americans. The tanks advance in 3 columns at dawn, engines roaring across the Brown River Valley. Dust plumes mark their progress. The crews are confident again. Intelligence says this sector holds infantry and artillery, maybe some Shermans, nothing that can stop massed T-34s at close range. They'll cross the valley, break the line, roll toward Pusan before noon. The youngest loader in 1st Platoon turned 20 yesterday. His crew promised him they'd celebrate in an American mess hall tonight, eating captured rations. The Pershings are hull down on the ridgeline, turrets barely visible above the crest. 8 M26s positioned with interlocking fields of fire, waiting. The American crews watch the T-34s approach through their gun sights. 1,500 meters. 1,400. The range closes. No one fires. The T-34 commanders scan for targets, see nothing but empty ridges and scrub brush. 1,200 meters. The lead American Pershing fires. The gunner aimed for the 3rd tank in the left column. Not the lead, not the obvious target. The one whose destruction would create chaos in the formation. The tungsten penetrator crosses 1,200 meters in 1.4 seconds, enters through the turret front, exits through the engine deck. The T-34 lurches to a halt, smoke pouring from every seam. The North Korean formation reacts instantly. Pivot, acquire targets, return fire. Excellent discipline. Textbook response. Completely inadequate. The ridgeline erupts with muzzle flashes. 8 Pershings firing in coordinated sequence, each gunner assigned a sector, each round a precision strike. The Americans shoot like they're at a range, methodical and calm, because at 1,200 meters the T-34s can't effectively return fire. 2 more T-34s burn before the North Korean commanders process what's happening. These aren't Shermans. These are the same tanks from Taejon, the mystery armor that killed 9 T-34s in July. The formation breaks. Some tanks charge forward, trying to close range where their guns might penetrate. Others reverse, seeking cover that doesn't exist in the open valley. 3 tanks attempt to flank left, engines screaming, tracks throwing rooster tails of dust. The Pershings traverse and fire with mechanical precision. 900 meters, 800. The range closes, but it doesn't matter. The 90mm guns punch through T-34 armor at any combat distance. A North Korean gunner gets lucky, lands a round on a Pershing's glacis at 750 meters. The shell deflects upward at a 30-degree angle, tumbles through the air, impacts a hillside 200 meters behind the American line. The Pershing's return shot is immediate and fatal. The Americans don't maneuver, don't reposition, barely adjust their aim. They're shooting fish in a barrel, and they know it. 1 Pershing commander radios his platoon. Conserve ammunition, 1 round per target. They're rationing shells because the slaughter doesn't require volume of fire. 12 minutes after the first shot, 14 T-34s are burning or abandoned in the valley. The 15th tank, its transmission shattered by a partial penetration, sits immobile with its crew fleeing on foot. Smoke columns mark each kill like grave markers. The smell of burning diesel and cordite hangs thick in the morning heat. American casualties. 1 Pershing with superficial armor gouging from a deflected round. 0 penetrations. 0 crew injuries. Not 1 Pershing takes a penetrating hit. The Soviet Technical Advisory Team arrives at the wreckage sites in September 1950, clipboards in hand, measuring instruments packed in wooden cases. They're metallurgists, ballistics engineers, armor specialists, men who designed the T-34, who calculated its protection values, who wrote the doctrine that promised superiority. Now they walk between burned hulls with expressions like mourners at a funeral. The team leader examines the first penetration. He measures the entry hole, 90 mm diameter, edges peeled inward, metal showing crystalline fracture patterns consistent with hypervelocity impact. He measures the exit hole, larger, 110 mm, edges blown outward from internal pressure. He calculates the angle, the energy transfer, runs the math 3 times, because the numbers can't be right. The penetrator maintained coherence through 45 mm of sloped armor, traveled through the entire fighting compartment, exited with enough velocity to punch through the rear plate. His calculations say this requires muzzle velocities the Americans shouldn't possess and penetrator materials that exceed Soviet tungsten carbide specifications. They examine 14 tanks. Everyone tells the same story. Frontal penetrations at ranges exceeding 800 meters. Clean holes, minimal spalling, penetrators that didn't deflect or fragment. One T-34 has an entry wound below the turret ring. The Soviet engineer photographs it from 6 angles, measures the impact point to the millimeter. That shot required precision gunnery that Soviet doctrine says is impossible at combat ranges. The Americans fired accurately while the T-34 was moving. The math says they have stabilization systems that Soviet tanks won't receive until 1954. The armor samples go into crates for shipping to Moscow. The team leader writes his preliminary report in a tent that night, chain-smoking, striking through sentences and rewriting them. He knows what this report means. The T-34-85, the tank that won the Great Patriotic War, is obsolete. Not outdated, not requiring minor improvements. Fundamentally obsolete against American post-war armor. His report doesn't spare feelings. The M26 Pershing demonstrates superiority in firepower, protection, and fire control systems that exceeds our projections by minimum 5 years. The 90mm gun penetrates T-34-85 armor at all combat ranges. The T-34-85 gun cannot reliably penetrate M26 frontal armor at any range observed. Enemy gunnery accuracy suggests advanced stabilization and optical systems not present in our current inventory. He includes the engagement ratios: 14-0 at Naktong, 9-0 at Taejon. Smaller engagements throughout August and September showing similar patterns. He doesn't editorialize, doesn't speculate. The numbers speak. The Americans' field armor that makes the T-34-85 a liability in any engagement. Soviet crews die before landing effective hits. The protection advantage that defined the T-34's success in Europe, gone. The firepower advantage that let it kill Panthers, irrelevant. Moscow's response arrives in October via encrypted cable. The T-54 program receives emergency priority funding. The new design specifications are brutal. 120 mm frontal armor minimum, 100 mm gun, improved fire control systems. The cable doesn't mention the Korean reports directly, but every specification addresses a failure documented in the wreckage analysis. Thicker armor to defeat 90mm tungsten penetrators. Bigger gun to penetrate American armor at extended ranges. Better optics to match American gunnery precision. The Soviet engineers know what the cable means. They have 18 months to design, test, and field a tank that can fight the Pershing on equal terms. 18 months to overcome a 5-year technology gap. 18 months before the Americans realize how badly they've outmatched Soviet armor and adjust their doctrine accordingly. The team leader burns his notes after transmitting his final report. Some truths are too dangerous to leave written. But the photographs of penetration holes, the measurements of armor failure, the ballistic calculations, those go into classified archives. The numbers terrify them more than the battles. The final accounting happens in late 1953, after the armistice, when American intelligence compiles every recorded tank versus tank engagement on the Korean peninsula. The analysts cross-reference after-action reports, unit logs, aerial reconnaissance photographs, even North Korean records captured during the advance to the Yalu River. They're searching for anomalies, statistical outliers, anything that contradicts the pattern. The pattern holds. 82 North Korean T-34-85 tanks destroyed in engagements where M26 Pershings were the primary American armor. 1 Pershing lost to tank fire. a side armor penetration at close range during confused night fighting near Chosin Reservoir, an 85 mm round that found the thinner hull plates at 200 meters when the crew was repositioning, 82-1. Soviet armor theorists read those numbers in Moscow and understand what died in Korea. Not just tanks, doctrine. The entire philosophy built on T-34 supremacy, the belief that sloped armor and the 85 mm gun defined modern armored warfare, the certainty that Soviet engineering dominated Western designs. All of it collapsed against tungsten penetrators and American metallurgy. The ratio isn't just improbable, it's apocalyptic. The Wehrmacht never achieved kill ratios like that against Soviet armor, even in the best Tiger Ace engagements. German tankers with 5-1 victories became legends. 82-1 isn't combat. It's systematic technological execution. It means every variable favored the Pershing: firepower, protection, fire control, crew training, mechanical reliability. It means the T-34-85 entered every engagement already defeated by physics and engineering. North Korean after-action reports, the ones that survived, tell stories of crews refusing to engage Pershings after August 1950. Tank commanders who spotted the boxy American silhouette and immediately withdrew, preferring court-martial risk to certain death. Soviet advisors filed complaints about declining morale, about crews abandoning serviceable tanks, about the psychological impact of facing armor they couldn't damage while being destroyed at ranges they thought were safe. The Americans noticed. Field reports from September 1950 mention T-34s retreating at first contact, refusing decisive engagement, using hit-and-run tactics against infantry, but avoiding armor-on-armor fights. One Marine Corps intelligence summary from October. Enemy armor demonstrates unwillingness to engage M26 units. Patterns suggest enemy recognizes equipment inferiority and adapts tactics accordingly. The North Koreans learned. The learning cost them 82 tanks. The ratio reshapes Cold War armor development overnight. The Soviets accelerate the T-54 program, pour resources into the T-55, begin preliminary work on the T-62. Each generation a direct response to the Pershing's demonstrated superiority. British intelligence tracks the Soviet design sprint through signals, intercepts, and defector reports. The Americans watch Soviet armor evolution through U-2 reconnaissance and CIA technical intelligence. Everyone understands the message Korea sent. Armor supremacy shifted. The doctrine dies harder than the tanks. Soviet military academies spend the 1950s rewriting armored warfare curriculum, integrating lessons written in Korean valleys. The old certainties, close with the enemy, rely on superior protection, mass armor for breakthrough. Those tactics got crews killed in 12-minute engagements. New doctrine emphasizes standoff range, integrated combined arms, not relying on tank versus tank duels the Soviets might lose. 82-1. The number appears in classified NATO assessments throughout the 1950s, a shorthand for American armor superiority, a benchmark for measuring Soviet responses. When the T-54 enters service in 1954, Western analysts compare its specifications against the Pershing's performance in Korea. When the Soviets field the T-55 with improved armor and fire control, the question is always, would it avoid the 82-1 ratio? The number becomes a ghost-haunting Soviet armor design for decades. No ratio like that could happen again. The Soviet Union would spend billions ensuring it, because 82-1 couldn't happen again. The T-54 enters production in late 1951, but the design work started 18 months earlier, before Korea, before the Pershing massacres, when Soviet engineers thought the T-34-85 would dominate for another decade. Then the penetration reports arrived from Taejon. The specifications changed overnight. The frontal armor jumps from 45 mm slope to 120 mm. The gun increases from 85 mm to 100 mm, firing rounds with 60% more muzzle energy than the T-34's weapon. The Soviets add a stabilization system, crude, functional, directly copied from captured German designs and improved beyond what the Wehrmacht achieved. Every change addresses a failure documented in Korean wreckage. The T-54 isn't an evolution of the T-34. It's an admission that the old design couldn't survive modern warfare. The first T-54s reached Soviet armored divisions in 1954. Western intelligence photographs them during May Day parades, measures the dimensions, estimates the armor thickness from profile analysis. CIA technical reports circulate through NATO headquarters with a single conclusion: the Soviets learned. The T-54 can't be penetrated frontally by the Pershing's 90mm gun at combat ranges. The Americans accelerate their own programs in response. The M47, the M48, the search for bigger guns and better armor that defines the 1950s tank development race. The T-55 arrives in 1958 with improved fire control, better optics, a more powerful engine. Soviet designers studied every American advantage from Korea and methodically eliminated them. Gun stabilization now works at speed, matching what the Pershing demonstrated in 1950. Armor protection increases again. The MBC protection system, defense against nuclear, biological, chemical weapons, reflects Cold War realities, but the core improvements target conventional armor combat. The Soviets aren't preparing for World War III. They're preparing to never lose an 82-1 engagement again. By the 1960s, the design philosophy transforms completely. The T-62's 150mm smoothbore gunfires, fin-stabilized projectiles, with armor penetration values that exceed anything the Pershing mounted. Soviet tankers who survived Korea train the new generation on different doctrine. Engage at maximum range. Don't close with superior Western armor. Trust your gun's standoff capability. The Hunter became the prey in Korea. The T-62 attempts to reverse the relationship through firepower and range. Western analysts watch the evolution and understand the pattern. Every Soviet tank from 1951 onward carries design DNA from Korean defeats. The obsession with armor thickness, the increasingly powerful guns, the fire control improvements, none of it happens without the Pershing proving that technological superiority wins battles before crews fire the first shot. The Soviets learned what the Wehrmacht learned in 1943. You can have superior numbers, superior tactics, superior crew training, but if your armor can't penetrate, and theirs can, you lose. The Americans don't stand still. The M60 arrives in 1959 with a 105mm gun. The M1 Abrams in the 1980s brings composite armor and computerized fire control. Each generation maintains the principle Korea demonstrated. Make your tank invulnerable to enemy fire while ensuring your gun defeats their protection. The principle works in Desert Storm, where American armor achieves kill ratios reminiscent of Korea against Soviet-designed Iraqi tanks. The race becomes self-perpetuating. Soviet armor improves, forcing American responses, forcing Soviet counter-responses, an engineering spiral that shapes defense budgets and geopolitical strategy through the entire Cold War. But the origin point is always Korea. Always the Pershing massacres. Always the moment Soviet armor doctrine faced American post-war engineering and discovered that 5 years of peace produced technologies worth a decade of wartime desperation. The Pershing itself retires from frontline service by 1953, replaced by newer designs. But its legacy lives in every main battle tank developed since. The doctrine of overwhelming technological advantage, of engineering superiority as the decisive factor, that begins in Korean valleys where T-34s burned. The lesson reshapes the next 40 years. The wreckage still rusts in Korean valleys today. Farmers plow around T-34 hulls half buried in rice paddies, metal monuments to a battle the crews never understood until it killed them. 70 years of weather stripped the paint, corroded the armor, turned the steel into oxide and decay. But the penetration holes remain, clean punctures through frontal glacis plates, entry wounds that still measure 94 mm across, exit wounds that tell the story of tungsten traveling at supersonic velocity through Soviet pride. Historians visit these sites with calipers and cameras, measuring impact angles, documenting the physical evidence of technological mismatch. A T-34 near Taejon sits frozen in its death moment, turret offset from the hull, thrown by ammunition detonation, landing in the exact position the explosion left it in 1950. The hole through the turret front is precise enough to show the American gunner's skill. Center mass. Perfect shot. The crew died before they understood what hit them. The Pershing's combat record in Korea becomes a case study at every armor warfare school in NATO. The kill ratio appears in classified briefings, in technical papers, in doctrinal manuals about how technology shapes battles. Cadets at Fort Knox study the Naktong Perimeter engagement, 15 T-34s destroyed in 12 minutes, as an example of perfect defensive positioning and overwhelming firepower advantage. Soviet military academies study the same battle as a cautionary tale about technological complacency. The lessons echo through every conflict since. Desert Storm, where American M1 Abrams tanks destroyed Iraqi T-72s at ranges where return fire was impossible, achieving kill ratios that approached Korea's numbers. The Abrams crews used thermal imaging and 120 mm smoothbore guns, technologies that trace their lineage directly to the Pershing's demonstrated principle. See first, shoot first, hit first, survive. The Iraqis fielded Soviet-designed armor, Soviet tactics, Soviet doctrine. They learned what North Korean tankers learned in 1950. Technological inferiority is fatal. The T-34 itself becomes a museum piece, displayed with honor as the tank that won World War II, but quietly acknowledged as obsolete by 1950. Russian military museums preserve them, polish them, celebrate their achievements at Kursk and Berlin. But the Korean War rarely appears in the plaques and exhibition descriptions. The narrative focuses on triumph, not the moment Soviet armor met its technological superior and burned. Some of the Korean T-34 hulls were recovered, shipped to museums, preserved as historical artifacts. They sit in climate-controlled warehouses with explanatory placards about Cold War conflicts. The penetration holes are still visible. Curators don't repair them, because the damage tells the story better than words. Visitors read about the 82-to-1 kill ratio and struggle to comprehend what that means in human terms. 82 crews who climbed into tanks believing in invulnerability. 82 sets of families who received casualty notifications. One technology confronting another and losing absolutely. The Pershing crews who fought in Korea are dying now, old men in their 90s, taking their memories with them. The survivors talk about the mechanical reliability, the gun's accuracy, the satisfaction of watching rounds punch through enemy armor at ranges the enemy thought were safe. They don't talk much about the crews inside the burning T-34s. War doesn't encourage that kind of reflection. But some admit privately that it felt wrong. The unfairness of it, the mismatch, shooting opponents who couldn't effectively return fire. The valleys remember. The wreckage rusts. The kill ratio persists in military history as proof that technology determines outcomes, that engineering superiority writes battle results before soldiers engage, that the crucible of combat reveals advantages invisible in peacetime analysis. The T-34 crews never saw it coming. Their successors never forgot.